Hello and good evening to everyone participating in this Camden Local Plan consultation event. My name is Dan Pope and I'm from Camden's Planning Service. I'm chairing tonight's event and will shortly be introducing you to the team we have from the Council this evening. This is the third and final of 3 events about the draft new local plan. Tonight's will focus on 3 areas: responding to climate change, design and amenity, and the natural environment. For this event, we have a presentation in 3 parts, and after each part, we will be having questions to the team. We expect the event to last between 45 and 90 minutes, depending on the number of questions that you have. You can ask as many questions as you like, but please keep them short and direct to help the team answer them in the best manner possible. There are 2 ways to ask questions. If you registered to attend this event, the best way is to submit questions in the box below the video, or alternatively, if you're watching on YouTube, you can submit questions on the text-only page. After this event, we'd like you to comment and share your views on the draft local plan, and you can do this on our Commonplace consultation website. We'll be emailing all those who have registered today with a link to that website, or of course you can do a web search for Camden Local Plan Commonplace. You can also comment simply by emailing planningpolicy@camden.gov.uk. I'll now introduce the team members who are taking part today. Firstly, we have Rebecca. Rebecca, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hi Dan, good evening everybody. I'm Rebecca Burden and I'm the Development Plans Manager in the Planning Policy team.
Thanks, Rebecca. And we also have Nicola. Nicola, do you mind introducing yourself too?
Hello, thank you. I am Nicola Tully and I will be taking you through the updates to the climate change chapter.
Great. Thanks for that, Nicola. So now it's time for me to hand you over to Rebecca, who will start the first part of the presentation, which is a brief overview of the local plan review. Following that, Nicola will cover how the local plan responds to climate change, and then we'll have questions. So over to you, Rebecca. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Good evening, everybody. So, as Dan has said, tonight's presentation will cover a brief introduction to the local plan review, followed by a presentation by Nicola on climate change, and then a presentation on the design and amenity chapters of the local plan, and a presentation on the natural environment chapter. And there'll be a break for questions after each presentation. In terms of why we're reviewing the local plan, so the National Planning Policy Framework sets a requirement for local authorities to review and update their plans every 5 years. The decision was taken by the Council in 2022 to commence review of the local plan to ensure that the Council continues to have robust and up-to-date planning policies that will deliver the Council's priorities. The purpose of the review has been to update our policies where needed and also to consider where new policies are required. To inform the local plan review, we held a call for views back at the end of 2022 and the start of 2023. And we've also commissioned updates to our evidence base to inform and justify our policy approach. The new local plan also incorporates the site allocations from the draft site allocations local plan, and these were subject to 2 rounds of consultation previously as well. The draft new local plan covers a number of different areas. It sets out the vision and objectives and overall development strategy for Camden. It includes area policies and site allocations, and it also includes a number of topic-specific policies covering housing, climate change, the local economy and town centres, communities, natural environment, design and amenity, transport and delivery and monitoring. The draft local plan is published for public consultation until the 13th of March. You can share your views on the draft plan with us in a number of different ways. So you can comment via our Commonplace site, and the link, I believe, will be emailed to you after this meeting. You can comment via email to planningpolicy@camden.gov.uk, and also by attending the public engagement sessions. And I know that this is the last session tonight, but if you missed any of the previous sessions, then I believe that you can watch the recording on YouTube via the council's website. In terms of the next steps, so as I've said, the consultation closes on the 13th of March. Following this, officers will be reviewing the comments submitted and updating the policies in the plan where needed. The updated draft plan will then be published for consultation at the end of this year, so at the end of 2024. And the plan will then be submitted to the Planning Inspectorate for public examination in 2025. The idea is then to adopt the plan in 2026. I won't wait for questions at this stage, and I will pass straight over to Nicola, who will take you through the responding to climate change chapter.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yes, I will take you through the updates made to the draft climate change chapter this evening. Here's a list of the policies in the draft local plan that relate to reducing the impact of climate change. These focus on existing buildings and materials, the circular economy and reduction of waste, minimizing carbon emissions, energy reduction in existing buildings and in new buildings, heat networks, and sustainable design and construction. There are also policies relating to adapting to the impacts that are already evident in the borough. These are overheating and cooling, water efficiency in response to drought, and managing the impact of flood risk and sustainable drainage. Here are the main issues that were raised during the first consultation for this local plan. These relate to policies that need to be strongly worded to discourage demolition. There needs to be a greater focus on embodied carbon and on retrofitting and improving existing buildings. A call to require circular economy statements for a wider range of developments, and providing clear guidance needed on what measures are acceptable in conservation areas and listed buildings, and also solar panels that should be on every new building in the borough. There were also issues raised in relation to adapting to climate change. These are promoting nature-based cooling over air conditioning and nature-based solutions also to reduce flood risk. The policies in this chapter are supported by evidence, and the key documents referred to here are the Council's Climate Change Action Plan. This was drafted following the Council's Climate and Ecological Emergency Declaration, setting a framework for action in the borough. There is a Delivering Net Zero Carbon study. This was a joint study with 18 other London boroughs, and this provided policy recommendations for net zero buildings in operation, and also a strategic flood risk assessment. This updated our 2014 assessment and identifies all flood risk sources in the borough. I will now take you through an overview of our sort of proposed policy approach in this chapter, starting with the overarching policy which sets out the broad measures we will expect development to take to mitigate and adapt to climate change. In this chapter, you'll also find that there are three policies focused on minimizing waste and increasing the reuse of resources, so on resource use. These are on, firstly, repurposing and refurbishment of existing buildings to be prioritised over demolition. A policy on the circular economy to ensure that materials are sort of used in their original form for as long as possible, and that new buildings are designed to facilitate easy maintenance and flexibility of use, and that development minimizes carbon emissions over the lifetime of the building. And this includes targets for embodied carbon, which considers carbon in existing built materials and the construction processes. There are also a group of policies focused on energy, energy reduction in existing buildings and new development. The policies in this section seek to support retrofitting of existing buildings to make them more energy efficient, and the approach proposed expects energy efficient improvements to be made, but these are focused on to be appropriate to the scale and nature of the proposal. We also expect new buildings to be designed and built to be net zero carbon in operation, and that all large developments utilize energy from heat networks where feasible. The plan also proposes a new approach to assessing energy reduction in buildings. This is different to the current local plan, where it assesses performance based upon a percentage improvement on building regulations. So this focuses on targets which take account of energy needed to heat a home or building over a year and its total energy use. The diagram on the left is on space heating demand. So this takes into consideration the amount of heat energy needed to heat a home and the factors that influence the space heating demand, which are built forms, so its design and orientation, and built fabric, so that's the insulation or windows, for example. And the energy use intensity is the amount of total energy that is needed to have that building in use over a year. And that takes into consideration the heating system or any appliances and lighting needed. So in consideration, in light of the policy in the draft local plan on energy and existing buildings, the heritage policy has also been updated to support the retrofitting of heritage assets. This takes into consideration the wider public benefits of delivering these sustainability improvements, and this will be a strong consideration in the determination of planning applications. The climate change chapter also identifies measures that can be undertaken in existing homes and buildings to improve their performance. So lastly, the final group of policies in this chapter take into consideration the need to adapt our buildings to current climate risks on overheating, flooding, and drought. So the policies here seek to ensure that development is designed to minimize overheating and promote cooling. And the interventions proposed relate to the scale and nature of that development. It also considers the areas in and around buildings. We also seek to maximise water efficiency and relieve water stress in London. And we'll seek to ensure that development achieves the highest possible standards for sustainable design and construction through BREEAM. In terms of managing flood risk, as mentioned earlier, there is a strategic flood risk assessment that has been updated, and the policies in this section reflect the recommendations of that report, seeking to ensure that development addresses and reduces flood risk to mitigate flooding on Camden's communities and any future occupants. Thank you very much. I believe it's time to ask any questions.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Nicola. So yes, we can now move on to questions. Before I ask the first question, just a reminder that the best way to ask questions during this event is to put them in the box below the video, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can submit a comment on the text only page. So I'll just go to the first question. Okay, so the first question is, why can't there be fixed requirements for embodied carbon of construction for residential or other uses? The proposed policy enables developers to claim that they have tried their best to reduce carbon caused by construction, which means that they'll come up with excuses. How will planners make a judgment on this? Is that one you're happy to respond to, Nicola?
Thank you, Dan. Yes, there is a draft policy in this chapter on minimising carbon emissions. This considers whole lifetime carbon emissions and also embodied carbon, and there are embodied carbon targets within this policy. The supporting text does make reference to understanding where there may be exceptions to this, but these will have to be fully justified within any application submission.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Nicola. I'm just going to put the next two questions together. So the first one is, what specific changes to policy are proposed to ensure prioritisation of retaining existing buildings over demolition and rebuild? And further to that, this second question is, construction accounts for a substantial amount, around 40% of the nation's carbon output. A significant saving could be achieved by avoiding the unnecessary demolition of existing buildings, hence saving the embodied carbon. What steps are being taken to strengthen the requirements in the local plan to prioritise reuse rather than redevelopment? Yeah, I appreciate that's quite a long question, so let me know if you want me to repeat it, but are you okay to answer that, Nicola?
Thank you, Dan. Yes, and thank you for the questions. We understand the issues behind this and has been investigated in the drafting of the local plan policy here. The current local plan has a policy criteria within a policy on substantial demolition. The draft local plan includes a sort of dedicated policy focused on prioritising retrofitting of existing buildings over demolition. It also requires, where sites have existing building, applicants will be required to submit a condition and feasibility study. This is to understand the reuse potential of a building or buildings on site and the best use of a site. Applicants will also be required to demonstrate that alternative development options have been fully explored, and the policy provides I believe, clear criteria for proposals of this nature and how proposals will be considered.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Nicola. I'm going to put the next two questions together as well. So the first question is, how can we have any confidence in the planning policies enacted by Camden when they are not enforced by Camden's planning committee? For example, the decision on 1 Museum Street, and we do have a similar question to that as well. So a second question is the council genuinely committed to adopting the retrofit and refurbish policy rather than demolition as the default position for all planning applications? And do actual planning committee decisions reflect this? I mean, I'll answer this one. I mean, I think it's really important to stress, first of all, that demolition is not the default position for all planning applications. And I think that's evident in, there are many examples of successful retrofit in the borough. These include the Standard Hotel, which is opposite King's Cross, the recent approval of 300 Gray's Inn Road. We have a life science scheme, where construction will start shortly at 105 Judge Street. And we also have another example at 1 Triton Square in Euston. Of course, there have been schemes which involve demolition, but the existing local plan and accompanying Camden planning guidance, they set out the steps that have to be followed before demolition can be justified. And one of the key steps is the need to do a detailed condition and feasibility study, which we get independently verified. And also, we need to explore whether the building can be reused or refurbished. So those steps have to be gone through before demolition is justified. And equally, whilst it is the case, whilst demolition is not the default position for all planning applications, equally, there isn't an outright ban on demolitions. There is a process to follow, and that's the process that is followed for all planning applications. And of course, this is now an opportunity for you to have your say on our existing policies by providing feedback on the draft local plan. And if you feel our proposed policies don't go far enough, then we really welcome your feedback on how from your perspective, they could be tightened up. And of course, we'll address those comments in producing the next version of the local plan. So really value your feedback. I don't know, Nicola, if you had anything to add to that.
Thank you, Dan. No, I don't have anything further to add.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, just going to check if there are any more questions. Yes, we do have a few more questions, Nicola. So the next one is, putting PV on every new building could be inefficient and uneconomic, given shadowing and shading. Should the text be changed to, where power produced is reasonable, or where not, alternative energy technologies should be considered? Do you mind answering that one, Nicola?
Thank you. Yes. That's a comment that we'll definitely take into consideration in reviewing the comments on the draft local plan. I do understand the impact of overshadowing. The the purpose of policies here are to try and maximise the generation of renewable energy. But thank you for your comments. This is something that we should take into consideration.
And another question for you, Nicola. Will a developer still be able to make a financial contribution to the council in lieu of not meeting climate change policy?
Thank you. So in terms of the energy policy for new buildings and the new approach sort of explained earlier in this presentation, this looks at the energy use intensity of the building, and that the energy use proposed should be balanced against the energy generated from the site through renewable energy. And where that balance is not met, so it wouldn't be a building net zero carbon in operation, there will be an opportunity to offset that balance where we are happy that all measures have been undertaken to reduce the energy demand of that building as much as possible. And the detail of that is set out in the supporting text of that policy.
Great, thanks for that, Nicola. So I'm just checking if any more questions have come through. There is a last question, although this last question refers to the recent One Museum Street scheme, which came to our Camden's planning committee late last year, and queries the independent report done by Hilson Movan. I mean, just to say, this isn't, this is a forum on Camden's draft local plan. It's an opportunity for you to give your views on the draft policies and how you feel they, could be, whether you think they will be effective enough and how you think maybe they could be changed if you don't think they could be effective. It's not the forum to revisit planning decisions. So I'll leave that question there. But just to the person who asked that question, if you feel our policies could be strengthened, then you're very welcome to provide feedback. So I think that is the last question on the climate change chapter. So I'm now going to hand over to Rebecca, who is going to cover design and amenity. So over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Dan. So I'm going to talk you through the policies in the design and amenity chapter. So as part of the call for views that we held in 2022 and 2023, a number of common themes were raised as part of that consultation, including the need for us to update our position on tall buildings to align with the London plan, the need to support families to alter and extend their homes and ensure that the local plan is family friendly, the need to strengthen our basement policy, and also to ensure that spaces are designed to be safe, welcoming, accessible and inclusive for all. Another theme was the need to ensure that we're resisting overdevelopment of sites. It was flagged to us that there was a need to have greater emphasis on delivering better places and spaces in Camden, and also to ensure that residential developments are built to a high design quality. Another issue was around the fact that high density development should be encouraged in accessible locations. There were themes around the fact that heritage assets should continue to be protected. Another issue is around the importance of providing trees and landscaping in new developments, and also around the fact that the plan should mitigate the impact of mechanical plant on residential amenity. As part of the process of updating the design and amenity chapters in the local plan, we have reviewed a range of evidence and guidance and strategy and policy documents, and these are set out on the slide in front of you. We also commissioned a building height study to inform our approach to tall buildings and ensure that we're in general conformity with the approach set out in the London plan. In terms of the scope of the design and amenity chapters, so they include a number of different policies which set out our approach to achieving design excellence, tall buildings, the design of housing, extensions and alterations, heritage, basements, advertisements and signage, shop fronts, protecting amenity, safety and security, air quality, and noise and vibration. To give an overview of the policy approach proposed in the draft new local plan. So with regards to the strategic kind of overarching design policy around achieving design excellence, so this policy has been updated to emphasise the importance of celebrating and reflecting Camden's diversity in the design of spaces and places. It also provides further guidance on the design of public spaces to ensure they are safe, welcoming, accessible and inclusive for all. The tall buildings policy in the plan has been updated to ensure that it is in general conformity with the London plan. The policy defines what a tall building is for specific localities in Camden and also identifies locations where tall buildings may be an appropriate form of development, subject to meeting the other requirements of the plan. The policy also proposes a number of criteria to guide the determination of applications for tall buildings in the borough. The plan now includes 2 new policies in the design chapter, the first on the design of housing and the second on extensions and alterations. So in terms of the design of housing policy, the policy approach ensures that all residential development is designed and built to create high quality, accessible homes. The policy also includes requirements to meet space standards, to be sustainable in design and construction, provide facilities for waste and recycling, be accessible and adaptable, and deliver biodiversity enhancements, and also provide play space for all ages. With regards to the extensions and alterations policy, so the plan proposes a more family-friendly approach to home alterations, including roof extensions to support households to expand and improve their homes to meet their needs. With regards to the basements policy in the plan, so this has been updated, and as part of this, we propose to restrict the size of basements that would be allowed by not allowing extensions beyond the footprint of the existing property. The policy also requires basement developments to mitigate their carbon impact. With regards to the safety and security policy, this has been updated to emphasise the need to ensure that places are designed and managed to feel safe for everyone, including the most vulnerable. It also includes reference to the need to mitigate potential suicide risks associated with the built environment, particularly in relation to tall buildings and structures and transport infrastructure. The air quality policy in the plan has also been updated to align with the London plan and ensure that all development is required to be at least air quality neutral. The policy also is designed to resist proposals for sensitive uses in areas of particularly poor air quality and proposals that will contribute to poor air quality. In terms of the noise and vibration policy, This has been updated to align with the agent of change principle, which is set out in the London Plan. So the agent of change principle places the responsibility for mitigating impacts from existing noise and other nuisance generating activities or uses on the proposed new sensitive development. The policy also requires applicants to submit a noise and vibration impact assessment where sensitive uses are proposed close to an existing source of noise or when development is likely to generate noise. The policy also resists development likely to generate unacceptable noise and vibration impacts.
Okay, thanks for that, Rebecca. So we'll now move on to the questions. The first question concerns tall buildings. So the proposals on tall buildings are interesting, given that tall buildings usually require large amounts of concrete and steel, which are major sources of atmospheric carbon. Will the council consider further limits on tall buildings to enable you to abide by your climate change policies? Who's best? Is that one you can answer, Rebecca, do you think?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that up. Thank you, Dan. So to respond to that question, the tall buildings policy in the draft local plan sets out a number of different criteria to guide the determination of applications for tall buildings. The policy states that the council will give particular attention to, amongst other things, so whether the proposal maximises energy efficiency and resource efficiency in accordance with the policies in the climate change chapter, and also whether the development delivers the highest standards of sustainable design and construction in line with our design policies and also the sustainable design and construction policy in the climate change chapter. And also as part of that, we will also consider applications for tall buildings against the other climate change policies set out in the plan.
Great, thanks for that, Rebecca, and just apologies to everyone there for having my camera off when I asked the last question. And we do have another design question. This concerns basements. Will Camden formally limit the size of all basement developments in residential areas to the footprint of the host building and to one level only? Camden has the chance to protect our community from the detrimental effect of the current policy, which enables basements of over 6,000 square feet and 2 levels, resulting in 3 years of construction noise, 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. Shift workers are unable to sleep. People are unable to work from home, and retirees cannot enjoy their homes and gardens. I think I'll pass that one over to Andrew. Is that okay, Andrew?
Yes, that's absolutely fine, Dan. So as Rebecca was mentioning in her presentation earlier, we are looking at restricting the size of basements further than is set out in the adopted local plan. It's already part of our existing approach that we resist basements of more than 1 story in the vast majority of cases. There is a bit of flexibility in the plan and supporting guidance for swimming pool construction, but generally basements should only be 1 story. We also restrict the size of basements based on the size of the host building, so the house, and also based upon the overall size of the garden. That's the existing approach in the local plan. And when you apply those size metrics, they work perfectly well in the vast majority of schemes, but there are some properties which are very large, and when you apply those proportions, are set out in the existing local plan, you can still end up with quite a large basement involving a long construction programme. So as Rebecca was mentioning, we're also going to be limiting the extent of basements. So for the vast majority of residential schemes, it will not be possible to construct a basement which goes beyond the footprint of the existing building. The implication of that is we will be able to safeguard a greater amount of garden space and also maximise the infiltration and drainage benefits that they provide. Alongside that, we will continue the existing approach in the local plan of allowing larger basements in certain settings, so in central London, for instance, in urban blocks, and also in new developments involving 10 or more homes, so much larger schemes. There is some flexibility to allow basement construction, but in predominantly residential areas where you have townhouses very close to one another and quite dense development, as I say, we will apply the existing approach, but we will be going further in the new local plan.
Great, thanks, Andrew. A few more questions have come in, so I'll turn to those now. The first one concerns air source heat pumps, which is very topical because the government launched a consultation today on proposed new permitted development rights for air source heat pumps. So this question, probably for Nicola, is: will the noise and vibration assessment address neighbours' concerns about air source heat pumps? There seems to be some negative associated with heat pumps and noise. Are you okay to answer that one, Nicola?
Thank you, Dan. Yes, there is advice within the supporting text in the climate change chapter on air source heat pumps. Generally, where the improvements have been made to the existing building to ensure that the building itself is energy as efficient as possible, the size of the heat pump needed can be reduced, and then its overall noise impact. And we advise that any heat pumps are situated away from neighbours. Generally, air source heat pumps are permitted development, providing that they meet certain criteria and conditions. However, I understand the concerns around these, and hopefully the advice provided here in the local plan helps to address those. But if you have any comments or concerns, please note these in the consultation.
Great, thanks for that, Nicola. The next question, we return to the issue of tall buildings. Why does Camden consider it needs new tall buildings? This building typology is usually associated with office use, the need for which is questionable. Is that one you're happy to take, Rebecca?
Yes, thanks, Dan. So the London plan requires local authorities to set out a policy approach for firstly defining what a tall building is for specific localities, and then also to identify locations where tall buildings may be an appropriate form of development in Camden, obviously subject to meeting the other requirements of the plan. So in respect of that, we need to ensure, so to have a sound plan and to kind of ensure that our plan is found sound when it comes to examination. We need to ensure that we're obviously meeting the requirements set out in the London plan, which require us to plan for tall buildings, to ensure that we're in general conformity with that policy approach that is set out.
Thanks for that, Rebecca. And that ends the questions on design. So I think it's back to you, Rebecca, now to take us through the natural environment policies.
Thanks, Dan. So the final presentation tonight is on the natural environment chapter in the local plan. So as part of the initial call for views that we carried out, a number of common themes are raised as part of that consultation, including the need to improve biodiversity and protect and encourage wildlife, the need to avoid water pollution and to protect water quality, to ensure the protection and planting of trees, especially new development. There were comments around the need to protect sites of importance for nature conservation, which we refer to as sinks. And there were comments around the need to set out our position on biodiversity net gain, obviously to respond to the Environment Act, and also the need to protect garden land from development within Camden. So as part of the process of updating the natural environment chapter in the local plan, we have reviewed a range of evidence, guidance, strategy and policy documents, and these are set out on the slide in front of you. We have also undertaken a review of our sites of nature conservation importance, sinks, and this evidence is available to view on our website. In terms of the scope of the natural environment chapter, so the chapter includes a number of policies which set out our approach to the natural environment, biodiversity, tree protection and planting, and also water quality. To give an overview of the proposed policy approach, so the plan includes a new policy which sets out our overarching approach to conserving and enhancing the natural environment in recognition of the fact that the council has declared a climate and ecological emergency. The biodiversity policy has been updated to take into account the government's mandatory requirement for delivering 10% biodiversity net gain on sites. However, this is likely that this will have a limited applicability in Camden, as the net gain is based on existing ground cover, and obviously the majority of our sites, all of the sites, are brownfield sites. However, the overall approach to protecting designated nature conservation sites and also promoting biodiversity enhancement in new developments remains unchanged. There's now a separate policy on trees in the local plan, and this aims to protect trees of value and also seeks replacements where trees are lost, and requires developments to incorporate additional trees in schemes wherever possible. And in addition to this, there's also a new policy on water quality, which seeks to protect groundwater sources to ensure that developments don't harm drinking water that comes from groundwater sources.
simplified, but I think the point you were making in your presentation, Rebecca, was that because our site's a brownfield, the 10% target should be relatively easy to achieve. That's probably best directed to Andrew. Would you mind answering that one, Andrew?
Yes, so I think it is a real challenge with sites which are already fully built on, because there is very limited green cover or no green cover on the site whatsoever. However, we do have some larger development sites that are identified in our site allocations where it might be more realistic to push for over and above the 10%. I think we need to do some more detailed work to sort of understand what the biodiversity potential is for those sites. It is something that's already starting to be looked at as part of pre-app discussions in some cases. But the site allocations in the local plan also do set out where there are biodiversity enhancement opportunities. And as Rebecca mentioned, the net gain legislation is one part of the toolkit. We can more broadly seek enhancements, and I don't think we need to be overly wedded to a particular metric, notwithstanding the fact that BNG is mandatory. But yes, I think where there's opportunities to go over and above that, that is something that we can explore further in due course. But it is only likely to be realistic in Camden, probably on very large sites, and also where there is some existing habitat within the red line, within the site boundary.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Andrew. Another question on this area. Where in the plan is there an option for residents to suggest sites for open green spaces, since the council is not interested in doing so? Again, is that another one for you, Andrew?
I'm happy to pick that one up.
Yeah, thanks.
Otherwise, so as part of the call for views that we held at the end of 2022 and the beginning of 2023, we held a call for sites as part of that, and we specifically invited people to submit local green spaces to us for consideration as part of the local plan review. However, at that stage, no sites were submitted to us. However, if there are any particular sites that you have in mind that you would like us to consider as local green spaces, then you are able to submit those as part of this consultation as well. So please do feel free to email those to the planning policy at Camden email address. Thank you.
Can I just to add on to that as well, from a sort of neighbourhood planning perspective, there's a number of adopted neighbourhood plans in Camden which have identified local green spaces within them, which we do protect through our development plan.
Great, thanks for that, Andrew. And Rebecca?
I don't have anything further to add to that. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, no, fine. I was just going to the next question, which has just come in. Is Camden's planning policy being driven more by a political desire to maximise financial contributions to the council and safeguarding issues to do with climate change, design, and environment? I mean, I'm happy to answer that one. The answer is no. In each of those areas, climate change, design, and environment, they're driven by a desire to deliver the objectives and vision of the local plan, which is to address the climate change emergency, to secure high quality design, and to enhance the environment. But it is important that we do have a mechanism in place where we do seek where we do secure contributions in the event that the standards in the plan are not met entirely. So, for example, where a development for justifiable reasons can't provide the full amount of open space, we would normally secure financial contribution that can be invested in existing open spaces. And that's a really important, that is an important source of funding. Equally with climate change, it's not every development can meet our climate change targets, and in those instances, we do secure a carbon offset payment, and that helps fund carbon reduction projects that the council delivers. But of course, the starting point is that we do expect developments to meet those standards, but as I say, it's not always possible, and in those cases, it is important that we do, secure contributions, because that can help incentivize developers to meet our policies in the first place. So just go to the next question. Actually, I think we've probably answered the next question. I should have probably put it together with the last but one question, but I'll just cover it anyway. Why doesn't the council use the existing process of the site allocation in their planning to develop a park, open space, nature reserve allotment, or to designate a green open space in order to create a buffer zone? The council can do it by using the government guidance on local green space designation. Why doesn't the local plan policy include this designation? I think, as Rebecca and Andrew have already said, we do welcome suggestions for any of those sort of spaces during this consultation. So if you have a particular allotment, nature reserve, or open space in mind, then please provide us the details. This is exactly what this consultation is for. And maybe Rebecca and Andrew can just address this point. Does the local plan have a local green space designation? I wasn't sure whether that was referring to something different to how we categorize open spaces in our local plan.
So what the local plan does do is it protects a very wide range of open spaces, designated open spaces within the borough. I believe there's in the region of about 280. I think the smallest one is about 75 square metres. The largest is perhaps obviously Hampstead Heath. So there are very many open spaces which are already formally designated. And the local plan also generally tries to maintain and protect amenity space and gardens as well, wherever it's possible to do so. But as you mentioned, Dan, if there are any spaces which perhaps would merit or warrant protection in the future, if they can be identified, then we can consider whether they could be designated as an open space on the policies map and enjoy sort of further additional protection.
Great, thanks for that, Andrew. Another question has come in. This is a general question, really, about what we include in the local plan. So why does the revised local plan include site allocations for sites such as 1 Museum Street, where planning permission has already been granted? I mean, just to clarify, it's been approved by Camden's planning committee, but it hasn't actually been granted yet, because it has to go to the Mayor of London for the GLA's decision too. Is that one for you, Rebecca?
Yep, I'm happy to answer that. Thanks, Dan. So I suppose we include a number of sites within the local plan as site allocations, which are already subject to planning permission. And I suppose this is for for two reasons. So I suppose firstly, it's to enable us to count them against our housing target, as they will obviously contribute to delivering and meeting our housing need that we have identified within the local plan. But also importantly, if those schemes were subject to change, or if the scheme that was approved wasn't implemented, then it enables us to provide kind of further guidance within that policy to guide any future planning application or scheme that may come forward in place of the one that has already been granted planning permission.
Sorry about that. Thanks for that answer, Rebecca. I think we are now at the last question. The proposals on...
Oh, it's all right. What time is it?
Sorry about that, I just got disturbed. Sorry, so just to the final question. The proposals on nature and biodiversity are positive. Could you explain what weight these will have to influence new developments? For example, the proposals for the West Kentish Town Estate, which are supported by the council, will remove many existing green spaces, mature trees and natural habitats. How can nature and biodiversity be given appropriate consideration in planning applications? In other words, will the new local plan bring about any real changes? Before I ask Rebecca, I think, to address that, just to be clear, as we've discussed today, any new development will have to satisfy the new biodiversity net gain requirements, and also the London Plan urban greening factor too. So I think it's important just to clarify that. Did you want to come in on that question, Rebecca?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you, Dan. So I suppose, as you may be aware, the council has adopted a biodiversity strategy, and this sets out the council's ambitions for protecting and enhancing nature and biodiversity in the borough. And obviously the local plan is a key mechanism for delivering this strategy. Through the local plan review, we've sought to strengthen our approach to biodiversity, and the biodiversity policy requires all major schemes to demonstrate how any impacts on biodiversity can be avoided or mitigated, and to establish how biodiversity enhancements will be maximised. Furthermore, the policy also requires developers of major schemes to demonstrate that biodiversity measures have been fully integrated into the design and development of their scheme from an early stage. And the policy also, as we've been speaking about, requires a biodiversity net gain of at least 10% on eligible sites, in line with the national mandatory target. And also, I suppose the policy also recognises the value that small schemes can deliver in terms of biodiversity enhancements, and in relation to extensions and alterations, the policy seeks biodiversity enhancements commensurate with the scale of proposals, and these could include measures such as the provision of biodiverse green roofs, or species features such as bird boxes or bat boxes. And I suppose also, in addition to this, the site allocation policies in the draft local plan also identify opportunities for biodiversity enhancements on certain key sites. And the proposed policy approach will also support the delivery of the council's emerging nature recovery network, which is a network of designated and non-designated wildlife sites and corridors for wildlife. I suppose in terms of the application of the policy, like all planning matters, decisions need to be balanced, and the need to protect and enhance biodiversity will be a consideration along with other matters as part of that decision-making process. The fact that we've strengthened our policy approach through the local plan review to delivering biodiversity in response to the council declaring a climate and ecological emergency gives us a kind of a solid starting point in negotiations on planning applications. And also the council has a nature conservation officer in post who also feeds into the decision-making process on planning applications, ensuring obviously that these issues are kind of at the forefront of consideration. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that, Rebecca. I can't see that we have any more questions. Just to say, we did receive a number of detailed amendments to policies, including heritage policy, design policies, biodiversity, natural environment, open space, sustainable drainage, overheating and cooling, and climate change. And just to say, thank you to those of you who have given us those detailed comments. They're not questions as such, so I'm not going to read them out tonight, but we will record them and address them in the next version of the local plan. So we don't appear to have any further questions. And since that was the last part of tonight's presentation, I'll just move on to the end of this meeting. So first of all, I'd just like to thank everyone watching for taking the time to join us tonight, and to everyone who submitted questions. We had some really good, challenging questions tonight. It's great to see the interest in our draft local plan. And I'd like to say thanks to Rebecca, Nicola and Andrew for their presentations and answers. As I mentioned earlier, we're keen to hear your views on what we've been discussing today and on any other part of the draft local plan. And as I said earlier, you can comment through our Commonplace website, and we'll very shortly be sending you an email with the link to all those who have registered. And just as a reminder, you can also comment by emailing planningpolicy@camden.gov.uk. The consultation on the draft local plan closes on Wednesday, the 13th of March. So you still have a month to provide comments, and we'll consider all of your responses when we prepare the next version of the plan. This event has been recorded and will be on the website in the next few days, alongside the recordings of the first two sessions in this series of local plan events. We'll send an email to all those who registered, letting them know when it's uploaded. All the questions will be available and time-stamped, so it is easy just to watch the sections that are of most interest to you. The recordings will also have subtitles, which you can turn on or off as you wish. So that brings us to the end of tonight's session. So from all of us here, thank you for your time this evening, and we hope you have a very good evening. Good night. Thanks.